What's up guys, welcome back to TUGGtv, and today we're here to discuss everything you have to keep in mind when buying a bass. So now the bass is one of the underdogs in our opinion, and honestly an unnecessarily abused instrument. Bass in fact is one of the most important instruments when it comes to music with the band. It provides timing to the drummer, it provides girth to the guitars, and overall that wall of sound that makes you have sort of
that massiveness
of full tone. We in fact have done a previous video describing and experimenting in terms of how important the bass is.
What exactly it provides to the mix.
Absolutely, and if you haven't checked that out, there's a link up there or in the description.
So this is a video which is part of our 101 series when we kind of try to think about all the necessary things for a beginner to keep in mind whenever they're probably buying a new guitar, which we have done quite a lot of videos. We have the links in the description coming on top as well. And just an FYI, this video is going to have a lot of link dropping. So yeah, it's going to be useful for you guys.
So starting things off, the first point you have to keep in mind is the genre and the style you are possibly going to adopt and start playing.
And whatever you are inspired by.
That's true. Now, the reason this is important is depending on the genre, be it things like rock, metal, blues or jazz, there is a wide variety of sound that is generated to create that sort of signature, aura of the music that it provides. And when it comes to the bass guitar, depending on your genre, you're going to have very different sounds. For example, a jazz bass is going to have a very, plush and ringy tone to it. But on the other hand, metal would have a very gnarly bass to it because metal requires a wall of sound. So it is important for you to keep these parameters in mind. Next up, we have to consider the scale length of the bass.
So for all the newcomers who don't exactly know what a scale length is, it's technically the distance from your nut to the bridge. Now what happens is a shorter scale length for a bass is somewhere around the 32-inch mark, and a normal scale is somewhere around the 34-inch mark, and you also get it all the way up to like 36, 38 and sometimes 40 as well. So there are a couple of reasons why you should consider the scale length of a bass. One of them is purely the factor about what your tuning is, because if you're playing standard, a 34-inch bass would be more than sufficient. But if you're down tuning and you need to kind of keep that tension in the strings so that they resonate.
Fundamentally very similar to guitar, if you are going lower down on tunings and if you don't have a long scale, the strings are going to get floppy and it becomes difficult to play and it doesn't sound very good, which is why scale matters.
And also another thing to keep in mind, if you guys have very short and stubby fingers, that's when the shorter scales come into play, because the 32-inch one would be easier for you guys to play around and you don't have to stretch so much.
The next point you have to keep in mind is the type of pickups that you're going to have on the bass. Now, without getting very technical, there are essentially three that you would choose from. You would have a P-style pickup, a J-style pickup, which you're seeing over here, and then you have the soapbox pickups, which is sort of
a humbucker for bass.
A humbucker for bass, yeah. So depending on the type of pickup that you have on your bass, it defines the tone that it is going to provide, from ringy and thin to meaty and gnarly. So this is in fact going to play a key role with the type of genre that you want to play.
Also, another thing to keep in mind is the number of pickups what you have on the bass and where exactly it's placed between the bridge and the neck.
Placement matters for you because depending on which pickup you choose, if you are going to be playing on the bridge, you are going to have a brighter tone, and if you're playing on the neck, you will have a warmer tone. And sometimes as a bass guitarist, it will be crucial for you to blend somewhere in the middle because you're the guy who's providing that wall of sound. Next up, the number of strings.
So coming back to where we left off about the number of strings, there are a couple of reasons why the number of strings matter. One of them, as we discussed, was the tuning of the guitar. If it's low enough, and obviously if you can't tune your first couple of strings to that particular tuning, you do need an extra thicker string to kind of compensate for it. Also, let's face it, a lot of times with an extended range guitar, you do need an extended range bass as well. So this is where it comes into play. Few things which you need to keep in mind for the extended range basses as well is the factor that your string spacing is going to be quite more nearer when compared to like a 4-string. So if you're somebody who's more used to playing on a fingerstyle on a 4-string bass, you would have to play this a couple of times to get used to the string spacing. So keep that in mind. Next up, we have a crucial point that you guys need to keep in mind, the weight and ergonomics of the bass.
Now, the reason you have to keep these in mind is because of two elements. The first point, when it comes to weight, if you end up buying a guitar which is perhaps made of something like mahogany, which is a denser wood, it is a heavier wood, which means it is going to be heavy. And while there are many ways of negating this in terms of like a double width strap, a thicker strap and all of that, remember, depending on your playing style, this is going to matter to you. For example, if you're someone like me who plays a lot standing upright, you might want to go ahead and keep in mind how you're going to manage this weight. On the other hand, ergonomics also matter because while there are plenty of basses in some amazingly wacky shapes and a certain shape might appeal to you, it is important that you sit down with it in the position you're most comfortable or your most, so to say, normal or default position, and you play it to see how playable it is and how comfortable it is for you.
Next up, we have one of the most ignored parts of buying a bass, which is actually the bridge. So when we're talking about the bridge, it's not necessarily the type of bridge what we're talking about, but the mass what the bridge provides. So essentially, whenever it comes to the bridges which are available for a bass guitar, it's usually a string through bridge or a string through body.
So just to give you a little bit clarity in terms of what we're talking about, when we say a string through body, what's going to happen is the strings of the bass are going to go through the body of the guitar, which means the resonance and the mass that you are accumulating is of the body. But on the other hand, if we're talking about a string through bridge, which actually this bass guitar is, we'll put in a zoomed in picture over here. What's going to happen is the strings are coming through and terminating on the bridge itself, in which case the mass of the bridge matters because that is what is going to provide your resonance. Having said that, this is an upgrade which you can consider doing in the future as well. So if you end up buying a bass with a particular type of bridge and you want to upgrade it, no problems at all. You can buy the bridge aftermarket or whatever. Just make sure you can get your hands to do it right or go to a good luthier. Next up, and this is no surprise, of course, electronics matter. So now guitar or bass, it doesn't really matter. When it comes to electronics, we would prefer having good quality electronics. Not just in terms of knobs and all that, but ensure you got good quality pots and there's no humming and buzzing and all of that. But specifically with bass, there is one component which you have to focus on, and that is the EQ.
So coming to the preamp of the bass, this is something which is more of a value add, an extra throw-in which a bass technically provides for the players. This particular bass guitar technically has a 2-band EQ, which is one for the bass and one for the treble. This again comes up to the first thing what we were talking about, having that versatility in the playing mode.
So of course, everything we've spoken of is in terms of this particular bass guitar. When it comes to basses, you have various options. So be it active, passive. Some manufacturers will give you something called a FAT, specifically with Ibanez. Yes. You might also get various components, like with Schecter, for example, you get a phase reverser. You also get split coiling. So
there are multiple options which actually come on a bass.
Heck, a lot of options.
Yeah, it just adds or cuts off frequencies. So yeah.
And you thought this was a useless instrument.
Just a small heads up for the beginners, it's okay to go for a bass guitar which essentially just has volume and tone because, let's face it, as a beginner you don't want to spend too much time dialing in your tone. It's just about playability.
Speaking of playability, this is one point that does not matter, and that is brand. Believe us when it says it absolutely doesn't matter whether you have a Fender or you've got a Schecter
or you have a
or
Gibson
whatever.
or
even
a
if
Fender.
You have a vocal guitar. Absolutely doesn't matter if you are a beginner and you're starting off to play. What matters to you is playability and not brand. So put that aside, look at what suits you best.
So the point which we're trying to make it across to you guys is the fact that for any bass, it's always better to go play the instrument, see if it kind of resonates with you, whether you're comfortable playing it, whether it's getting the type of tones what you need, and then picking it up.
And last but not the least, does it inspire you? So I mean, irrespective of instrument, guitar, bass, drum, doesn't matter. What matters the most is invest in an instrument that every time you look at it, or even if it's not around, you should want to go back to it and sort of be inspired to play that one song you've always wanted to play, or start up with your scales or whatnot. No different to a bass. So with that, we sum up some of the key points which we think are important that you keep in mind before buying your bass guitar. For those of you who are wondering, the bass in the background is a Chord Action V5 Plus 5-string bass guitar. I have done a previous video in terms of reviewing it. There's a link to it here. You can check it out in case you want more information in terms of pricing, availability and all that stuff.
So what did you guys think about this video? Is there an aspect of the bass guitar which you think we should have addressed? Let us know in the comments down below. So if this is the first time that you're coming across our video, make sure you hit that subscribe button because we have a lot of videos headed your way. Original compositions, experimentations, funny videos and random shit as well.
So this is TUGGtv signing off. Until next time,
Stay metal.